flight deck to know and realize that that guy's ready to go. What I normally saw was one of these. And the reason they do that is because they want to get their hands back on those controls. You want to let go of one hand, you're going to get shot off a catapult? Heck no. And I don't blame them. So anything with their hand above their shoulder was fair game to launch the airplane, and that's usually what I saw and what I'm looking for. In fact, with all of these Navy pilots, we have what we call a catapult grip that comes up out of the console, and there's a little T at the top. Once it comes up out of the hole, then it has a little T, whereby the pilot can actually grab a hold of it, and so that when you get that catapult shot, your hand doesn't get jerked back. The Navy said, we got to do something about that. We're losing too many airplanes that go in the water. So they made a catapult grip, and you can actually wrap your fingers around it when you got the power at full, and it won't allow you to bring your hand back. So they don't want to give it all this stuff and do this. By that time, it's too late. So it's one of these, and out they go. All right. Now, there's a couple of things. See that helmet? The helmet that this pilot now has on, he's coming up to the catapult with the visor down, the dark visor down, and that's the way we launch the airplanes in the daylight. That little knob will allow him to loosen it and bring it all the way to the top and tighten it down. That will take that black or dark visor up, and underneath that there's a clear visor, and that's the way we launch the airplanes at night. So he has an option of having either or. Okay. Additionally, when you're at full power, it's like turning your stereo system up full blast with that surround sound. It's so loud and it's making so much racket that it makes your nose tingle and you want to scratch it. You don't want to do that, right? Your hand is above your shoulder. Don't do that. Okay. C story. One day I was launching airplanes, and after the guy had gotten launched, he came back and made a landing. He came down, storming down to my office, pounded on the door, and I walked in. He says, I got a bone to pick with you. I said, what is it? He says, I got launched today, and I wasn't ready to go. I said, what? What do you mean you weren't ready to go? He said, yeah. I said, well, what happened? And I don't want that to happen again, so what happened? He said, well, I did have a problem. I said, well, what was it? He said, well, I saw your signal, I went to full power, and the airplane was shaking around, rocking and rolling, and my nose began to tingle, but I didn't scratch it. I said, good for you. But he said, what happened is I had a little bungee cord here on the side, and that's where I kept my maps and charts. And those maps and charts are what I was going to use on my mission that day, bombing and run and so forth, and they fell on the floor. And I had my dark visor on, and I couldn't see them. I know they're on the floor. It was dark in the cockpit on the floor, and I know they're there, but I don't see them. So I didn't want to get launched because they're going to disappear back in the black hole. I can't unstrap. I can't get out and do it. You know, if they're down there, I'll never get them. So what I did was I raised my visor, and when I located them and grabbed them and got a hold of them, guess what happened? You don't want that hand to come above that shoulder. You don't want to scratch him. For goodness sakes, don't raise or lower that visor. You're out of here. Okay, what's the signal? All right, he salutes me, I salute him. Now before I launch him, I have a couple of things to do. The first thing is that this fence wasn't here when we were launching airplanes. We put that fence here to protect you people from falling overboard. And it's working, I might add. We haven't lost anybody yet. We had one jumper, but that didn't count. Okay. Down in the hangar deck, all the way forward on the starboard side, that's the right side, you can take a look at our berthing areas. We have some displays up there. We have hundreds of people that live on the bow of the ship. And there are passageways that come out of those berthing areas onto the catwalks that we have on either side, and there are ladders that will allow them to come up onto the flight deck. And if I gave the signal to launch 507, and we have Joe and Mo down there that come up onto the flight deck, guess what's going to happen down on the bow of the ship? That's not pretty. You don't want to know about that. So that's the first thing that the catapult officer has to do, is to check to make sure that nobody is coming up those ladders. And the second thing is this. I don't know what it is with the captain of the ship, but he always finds the worst operating condition in the whole ocean in which to operate. I mean, we're really in bad weather. And so when we're rocking and rolling around, he's in the middle of the ship. Not too bad, right? Well, I'm on the bow here, and we're going up and down pretty good. And when I say pretty good, I'm talking 40 to 50, maybe 60 feet that we're moving. And sometimes we go down to that low spot, and we have waves that come up over onto the flight deck. And I don't know what it is with these pilots, but for some reason, they don't want to get launched when the deck is going down. So the second thing I had to do was to make sure that that deck was on the upswing when I launched the airplanes. What is the signal? The signal is this. Look, I don't think it's like that. That's the signal to launch the airplanes. Now I just said the signal to launch the airplanes. The catapult officer doesn't launch the airplane by pushing or twisting or doing anything like that. He gives the signal to launch. On the Midway class carriers and older. On the newer ones, it's a little different in some occasions, but that's, I'm not going to talk about the newer ones. But at any rate, on the Midway, he didn't really do anything other than give a signal. Well, who in the heck fires it then? Well, remember I said that we put the shuttle in detention? Well, there's what we call the deck edge operator. See where this gate is over here along the fence? There's a ladder that goes down, and when you go down into the catwalk, you can see from about your waist up in the catwalk, and there is a fella called the deck edge operator, of all things, right? Deck edge operator, and he stands about 15 feet in front of that gate down in the catwalk, and he's the guy that operates the catapult. He's the one that applies the hydraulic pressure behind that shuttle, and he pushes it forward. That's called going into tension. And when you go into tension, it's like cocking a gun. And when you cock a gun, it can get fired at any time. The catapult is the same. And so if it can get fired at any time, after he goes to tension, he puts his hands up in the air. You may have seen this in some movies, I don't know. But at any rate, once you go into tension, he puts his hands in the air, because if for any reason that catapult gets fired, he can at least say, "It wasn't me, I didn't have nothing to do with that." Until the catapult officer gives him the signal to fire the catapult, and then the deck edge operator is the guy who actually pushes the button to fire the catapult on the older carriers, Midway included. I'm almost done. I know it's hot. What happens at the end of the catapult stroke, and what does the pilot have to do? At the end of the catapult stroke, those spears go into the water brake, so the shuttle stops. The aircraft continues on. The nose launch bar is part of the aircraft. It's spring-loaded to the up position, so all the pilot has to do at the end of the catapult stroke is wait until his eyeballs stop rolling around, and then he raises the landing gear, and then he makes a port clearing turn if he's been fired on the port catapult with the old two catapult type carriers and parallels the ship. If he's been fired on the starboard catapult, he makes a starboard clearing turn and parallels the ship. Why do we do that? The reason for it is if he did not make the clearing turns and he loses an engine, or he catches on fire, or has to eject, or whatever, he's going to go out at least a quarter of a mile in front of the ship and go in the water. If he's elected to do that, he can then go and climb out. But unfortunately, I've been told by the captain about 2 weeks ago, he said he can't stop this carrier on a dime. It takes 75 cents to get us stopped. So what happens is, unfortunately, the ship runs right over that aircraft and he loses. Well, you can say, wait a minute, this guy's no dummy. He knows his engine's not running, he's going to eject. So where do you think he's going to be? Right up there, hanging from the yard arms, right? Or better yet, you say, my God, this deck is 4 acres. He's going to land on the flight deck and not even get wet. But let me tell you, this flight deck is not a safe place to land on. We've got airplanes turning and burning, and we're going to have aircraft launching and recovering here. This is not a good place for anybody to land on. So you do the clearing turns to avoid that. Now, they can eject or go into water, and we have helicopters airborne. Whenever we're launching or recovering aircraft, that's the most dangerous time for the pilots. And so there are at least 1 helo, usually 2 airborne, and their job is to go out and pick up those survivors and bring them back. Okay, that's all I have for you for the catapults. Please take the other tours. If you have any questions, come on up and see me, and have a good day on the Midway. Thank you very much.
right, nice and informative. Learned something today. It sure did get hot up here.
I know, I'm like...
All right, so I guess we get to go up in there. It's probably where the other 20 or something. Oh, that's 47 right there.
Oh.
And if there's 56 and only about 9 more,